Welcome back to the Mind Hiking Podcast. I'm your host, Brody Frye, and today I had the pleasure of interviewing Glen Van Peski. This is an amazing interview. He is the author of the new book, Take Less, Do More, Surprising Life Lessons in Generosity, Gratitude, and Curiosity from an Ultralight Backpacker. He's also an engineer, an entrepreneur, a sought-after speaker and philanthropist, and he is the founder of the amazing gear company, Gossamer Gear. Incredible company. Definitely check them out. Look it up. Really cool stuff. I had expectations going into the interview, and it totally blew me away. He is an amazing person. Just getting to know him and getting to talk with him was an absolute pleasure and a treasure. It was such a special opportunity, and I'm so grateful for all of his time. I know he's a busy guy, and to find time to do an interview with me on the podcast, it was an absolute honor. So I'm very grateful for that. I really hope you guys enjoy. He's got a lot of wisdom, a lot of knowledge to share, and he absolutely made an impact on my life. So please, at the very least, check out his new book. It's an incredible read, and it really left an impact on me, and I'm sure that it's going to leave an impact on you as well. He really spoke from the heart, and you can hear it and tell in his message. It's awesome. So definitely check that out. Take less, do more. And now, without further ado, Glen Van Peski on the Mind Hiking Podcast. You're not going to want to miss this. So, stay tuned. Hello and welcome, everyone. I'm your host, Brody Frye, and here we dive deep into difficult questions. We'll map out thoughts, theories, and crazy ideas for the love of knowledge and growth. So, how do we answer some of the mind's toughest questions? This is the Mind Hiking Podcast. Mr. Glen Van Peski, thank you so much for your time. I'm really grateful, and I really appreciate you being here on the Mind Hiking Podcast. I can only imagine that you're a very busy man, and I just appreciate your time. So welcome.
Well, thanks. Glad to be here. And yes, I am busy, but part of being busy is picking things to be available for. So
absolutely.
Great to be here.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, thank you very much. So I would love to start off the podcast just by letting you know that I have read I bought your Audible version of the book and listened to that, and it's absolutely fantastic. It really spoke to me. It was super incredible, and it is absolutely up there with one of my favorite books of all time. And I don't think I can understate how inspiring it was to me.
Well, I'm glad you liked it. You never know how it's going to speak to people, but it's gratifying to hear that there's something in the book that seems to speak to about everybody.
Yeah, absolutely. And I love how open you were with sharing your story as well, because I can only imagine how difficult that is. I know you've overcome many challenges and struggles in your life just from reading the book, and it's really inspiring to see just how you've overcome your challenges and just prospered from there. So very inspiring. I would love to start off also by just asking you, being in the industry that you are with Gossamer Gear, what was your original inspiration for your love of nature and the great outdoors? I mean, for me, I grew up on a farm in Illinois, and my grandfather was a skier. He was a ski patroller. He actually was a ski patroller for the 2002 Winter Olympics, and
wow.
So he was also a rock climber as well, and super inspirational for me. And he really sparked my love for nature and the great outdoors. So I'm just wondering if you had a role model such as that for your interest in the outdoors.
Well, I think to start with, I was lucky enough. I was born in 1958, so I was lucky enough to grow up before the internet. So, I mean, we lived outside. I don't have a lot of memories of being inside. We were always outside, and as long as you were home for dinner, no one really knew where we were. We used to go camping. I remember usually like national parks, and my dad's International Harvester, with the Coleman lantern, the Coleman stove. And I just love being out there with the trees and the smell of the pine needles and, the sounds of the birds and squirrels and everything. And then when my parents got divorced and we moved back east, my mom joined the Appalachian Mountain Club. So I was old enough then to go on some hikes with them. So that was fun. And then in Boy Scouts, when I was in Boy Scouts, our troop didn't do a lot of like big trips, but we had like a troop campground in the local woods that we would go to, and even that was fun. So
yeah,
that was kind of growing up. That was my exposure to the outdoors.
Wow, that's awesome. It's amazing what you can learn and what nature can show you and teach you too. I'm always fascinated with it, and I fortunately my parents gave me a lot of freedom, and being on the farm, it ended up being a place where all my friends we always just would spend all the time at the farm, and everybody would come over just because we had the forest, and we'd be spending like sunrise to sunset out just like building forts and starting fires and little campfires and whittling sticks and things like that. And I'm very grateful to my parents for just providing me with a life like that. I'm very grateful for that. So that was where my spark and interest for the love of outdoors started. I also grew up racing motocross. My father owned a mechanic shop, and did that until I was about 13 years competitively. And actually, unfortunately, I lost two good friends to the sport. They passed away from motorcycle accidents, and I remember being on the starting line and just told my father, Dad, I don't want to do this anymore. And he was like, okay, that's totally fine. So I quit doing that, and I still enjoy the sport. So something that kind of, got me outside and got to kind of fulfill that craving a little bit was mountain biking. So I got really big into mountain biking with my friend and I. And again, it's so peaceful out there, and it's almost nicer because you get to enjoy the sounds of nature and the birds rather than the motor. But so I love just being outside and doing anything outdoors, especially in the world we live in today. Could you speak to how important it is to get kids outside? I feel like we're, especially with the technology nowadays, I feel like we're losing that love for the nature almost. What are your thoughts?
I recently read a fascinating book, The Comfort Crisis by Michael Easter.
Okay.
And actually, if you give me your mailing address afterwards, I'll send you a copy. I have some signed by the author.
Oh, wow. Thank
but
you.
he talks about this, how, we've done too good a job, especially in this country, of making our life comfortable, of living at 72 degrees and sitting down all day. Mm-hmm. And he says, we've done such a good job of making life comfortable that it's killing us. And he cites a number of studies. And a fascinating part of it to me was he talked about, everyone's familiar with the nutritional pyramid. And he says there's kind of an outdoor pyramid too. And like the base level is 20 minutes outside without your phone 3 times a week. That's just like the base level for mental health and all sorts of things. And then he said the next level up is, and I may not be getting this exactly right, but next level up is something more wild, like hiking a long hike or going backpacking or something. And he talks about the 3-day rule, where usually the first day when you're out, you're still thinking about all the things at home and deadlines and tasks you have to do and people that you need to call, stuff like that. And he says it really takes like 3 days to leave that behind and just really be there in the woods by yourself, not listening to anything, just, letting your mind slip into that soft focus state that's so important for us. And then he said the peak of the pyramid is kind of once a year, you should do something to push your boundaries. And he talks about ideally it should be, I mean, not ideally, but like rule number one is you have to live, like don't die.
Yeah.
But it should be something challenging so that you only have a 50% chance of completing it. So he gave the example, one of the guys he was interviewing, of doing a rim to rim run in the Grand Canyon. And, the guy said, well, if you've trained for it and you regularly run ultra marathons, well, that's not really this kind of challenge. If you're undertrained and there's a 50-50 chance that you'll be able to complete it, that's the kind of pushing against the boundaries that they're talking about once a year, doing something that's a little bit scary, but even if you fail, you'll still live.
Yeah.
So yeah, time outdoors is so important.
Yeah. Well, I love that. And actually, I like that you brought up the comfort zone part of it too, because I do speak about that a lot on the podcast and how important it is to get outside of your comfort zone, because it's, from what I can see, it seems like it's almost like a muscle. Like if you're not exercising it, it's gonna shrink down on you, and you're gonna get, your comfort zone is gonna kind of shrink in, and you got to keep pushing those boundaries and fighting those back, because otherwise you're gonna end up again. I think a lot of it has to do with the technology nowadays, and we get caught up, kind of hiding behind screens and like texting and things like that. And another huge reason why I started this podcast was just because the love of genuine conversation, and it's a perfect excuse to have a distractionless conversation where you're sitting down with somebody and getting to have a real talk. And really the only other place you get to see that is like around a campfire.
Yeah, around a campfire. I was talking to a guy today, and even more than around a campfire, I think going for a long walk. A couple of years ago, we did a 450-mile hike in Europe, the Alpe Adria. Oh, and wow. It was a group of people that we didn't all know each other, but we all knew the guy who organized it. So they were all interesting people. And, it's so rare in life that you get a chance for uninterrupted conversation with someone. If I meet someone for coffee, even though I'm retired, it might have an hour, might have 2 hours, but then it's like, okay, well, I got to do these other things. And, it's such a blessing to be walking, you're walking all day, 8 hours for the day. Mm-hmm. And I would find myself walking alongside someone and, the conversation slipping into things that matter, whatever they are, philosophical questions or, upbringings, things like that. And I'd ask something and the person would say, well, it's a long story. And I'd say, well, we got nothing to do for the next 6 hours, so go for it. But it's just so nice to have that uninterrupted time to really dig deep and get to know people.
Absolutely. And also I feel like it's harder and harder to find people that are willing and open to express themselves, because it's almost weird for them to even be asked to go ahead, open up. Like this is a open conversation.
Yeah, that's true. The guy I was talking to lives in the UK, and he was talking about how men tend to like to interact all facing the same direction, whereas women like to be facing each other.
Yeah.
But luckily for us guys, walking is you're both facing the same direction. So
yeah, so it works
and I think
out.
there's something about the walking it's enough activity to kind of engage your mind, but not so much that you have to focus on it. It leaves your brain with space to have a conversation, or if there's no one there, to think about things you need to think about.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I feel like I was talking to my uncle actually recently about a similar topic where, like, the two of us, if we're going on a long trip, like if we're going, I go fishing with him a lot, and if we're going for a drive, like we're totally okay with sitting there and just enjoying the view on the drive. Like typically we leave at like 5 a.m, and so we're like just watching the sun coming up, and we're totally fine with that. Or if one of us have something on our minds, we're totally fine talking as well. And it's just a nice, a nice environment to just be comfortable in. So
Yeah, no, that's great. And it's, different with, you have a relationship with your uncle, so it's different with new people. But the other thing that Michael Easter talks about in The Comfort Crisis is how good a job, which is bad for us, how good a job we've done of killing boredom. That, we can't just be okay. If we have a second, we pull out our phone to check email or look at a few cat videos or whatever the case may be.
Yeah.
And, that's another great thing about backpacking on a long trip is you have no cell service. So you're just alone with your brain and whatever you want to think about. And that's a good exercise for us.
Absolutely. I love that. Yeah, you're totally right on that. Sometimes it feels like it makes people uncomfortable when they're sitting alone or they have nothing to do. Like people start to get fidgety, almost like, oh, I got to be doing something. But yeah, no, that's good to be able to just sit there and take it in and enjoy life. I love that. I love like sitting next to a lake or just sitting somewhere with a view and being able to just take it in without having to. Another problem is just having to look at it through a screen, like instead of taking a photo or a video of it, just being able to be present. So it's a really cool thing, and it's so crucially important, vitally important, and just we got to hold on to that because I feel like it's slipping away from us.
It's so rare in the way we've constructed society here.
Yeah. So you had a story in your book that really spoke to me. You talk a lot about generosity, and I love that. And you kind of, towards the beginning, you talk about this story that really sparked that for you, and just a couple that you ran into on your bike trip across the country. Could you? I know the story, but I would be honored if you could share that with us on the podcast here.
Sure. Yeah, this was an early experience. And, I have to say my mom always demonstrated generosity. It wasn't like she taught us about it, but she demonstrated that to others, sharing of her resources and time and engaging in other people's lives. And so we knew that as kids. But so... three buddies and I rode across the country on our bicycles in 1976. So this is, pre-internet, pre-cell phones, we didn't even have bike helmets. And we, the navigation, which today like boggles my mind thinking about it.
Yeah.
We just took a map of the United States that we got at the Auto Club or something and I took a blue highlighter and drew like a line kind of across the country from Amherst, Massachusetts, where we were, to kind of San Francisco area, because that was kind of straight across.
Okay.
And then when we got to each state, this was the era when any gas station, besides pumping your gas for you and checking your oil and cleaning your windshield, you could walk in and get free paper maps of that state or in that town and things like that. So when we got a new state, we'd go get a free paper map and look at our kind of map with the blue line, and then look at the map of that state and go, okay, well, we can kind of take these highways and that'll be close. Yeah. So we would camp either, we had no money. We would camp either at kind of rest stops along the way, or sometimes if we found ourselves in kind of a rural area and it was evening, we would go up and knock on a door and ask people, hey, we're bicycling across the country. Can we sleep on your front lawn? And I don't ever remember being turned down.
Okay, yeah.
I'm not sure how that would go today, but probably in the Midwest still, as people go, yeah, sure. So this one day we go up and knock on the door, and the guy says, oh yeah, sure, but you'll be more comfortable around the side here. So we said thanks, and we're setting up our tents and stuff. And he comes out and says, what time do you guys get going in the morning? And I said, well, usually 7 o'clock. We try and, we got a lot of miles to do to get to California. So we like to get going early. And he looked disappointed, and I asked him, why do you ask? And he said, well, my wife and I would really like to get you a proper breakfast to send you on your way, but she's got really bad arthritis, and the mornings are particularly painful, and there's just no way she can get up early. And so I said, that's appreciate the thought, but we don't need anything. We've got everything we need. Appreciate you thinking of us.
Mm-hmm.
And so he went back inside and ended up coming out with a box of the little mini Hostess donuts. He didn't want us to have nothing. So we said, no, we don't need anything, but thank you. And so we go to sleep. Next morning, the dew's still on the grass, and we're packing things up, and the door to their house opens, and the guy stands on the little landing and motions us over. So we figured, he wants to say goodbye before we take off. So we go over there, and he motions us inside, and his wife had gotten up through I don't know how much pain and made a breakfast that we could not believe. I mean, there were eggs and sausage and biscuits and gravy,
Wow.
massive amount of food. I'm pretty sure we ate through their breakfast groceries for the rest of the week.
Wow.
And we polished it off, and, just knowing how important it had been to them that she had, suffered through the pain to make us this huge breakfast so we could go on our way with full bellies.
Yeah, that's incredible. That story really stood out to me, and it's so amazing knowing that there's people like that in the world. I love stories like that. Just to hear things, acts of service like that, just like selfless service, just to help people like that. It's so inspiring and just warms my heart hearing stuff like that. So that really spoke to me. So thank you for sharing that.
And those people are still out there.
Yeah.
I've told the story enough now with the book that I can do it without crying. But, I've been telling that story for almost 50 years. And
Wow.
I like to think that as long as they lived, they told that story from their side. Remember those 4 hungry kids that showed up that day in 1976 and see their eyes bug out when they saw that food. And, I wonder whatever happened to them. And
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's so cool. Well, thank you for sharing that. Another big part in your book that really stood out to me as well was in my life, I was also pursuing my private pilot's license, and it's still part of the journey for me, still on the checklist. It's it takes a lot of time. I'm sure, obviously, a lot of time and a lot of expenses, and so it's still part of my journey. But the story in your book, it just, when I was actually at that part of your book, I was actually driving, listening to the audiobook, and my jaw just dropped. Like what you went through, like I wasn't even prepared to hear that in the story. Like it didn't even cross my mind that that's where this was going. It was like times like that or struggles like that, some of the things that you've had to go through and overcome in times where you feel like you're in such a tough position and it's so hard to move on. Where do you find your strength to overcome challenges like that?
Well, did you download the other material from the audiobook?
I did not know.
Oh, so you didn't see the picture of the plane?
No, I didn't.
I don't know is your podcast video or just audio?
It's just audio.
Oh, okay. So I won't show the picture
Okay.
of the plane, the mangled plane. What I find out, what I find is that most people have been through some things that you don't really know about, don't really come up in conversation because we don't really have time to get kind of below the surface most of the time.
Yeah.
But people have been through a lot. And I think that's just part of life. And also in the comfort crisis, they had a fascinating study, I thought, that's quoted in the book. And they got this group of people and separated them into two groups. They asked them some questions, made them fill out a questionnaire. And I don't know what the questions were, but they kind of separated them into people that had had kind of a sheltered life and not a lot of bad stuff had happened to them, and people that had been through some hardship. And then they did some objective, quantifiable tests. One that I remember was, holding your hand in a pail of ice and water, and they would measure how long people could do it.
Yeah.
And then when they looked back to which group the people were in, people that had been through some hardship and adversity could hold their hands in the ice water much longer than the people who hadn't.
Wow.
So I think that adversity kind of builds resilience. And then you see, they found also in the study that people with having had hardship in their life, it was lower incidence of abuse of painkillers, less likely to consider themselves victims, more grateful for things. So there's a lot of benefits of going through hardship. I mean, none of us wants to sign up for that,
Right.
obviously. But there is a benefit to it when we have to end up going through it.
Absolutely. Yeah, and I think that might have to do kind of along the lines of how we started with the comfort zone as well, as far as the pain test with the ice water, just having experienced so much struggle and hardship that's not as difficult for them because of what they've been through or the pain that they've felt before. I also feel, sorry.
Go ahead.
I was just going to say, I also feel like people that have gone through hardships and struggles tend to be like the sweetest people you could meet. Like, it seems like the more difficult the event was, the kinder and the more generous the person is. At least that's the pattern that I've seen in my life.
Yeah, I mean, some people go bitter. But it was interesting, just on the news last night here in Bend, they interviewed a gal who she'd been skiing on Mount Bachelor. An out of control skier had come from behind her, hit her, knocked her unconscious.
Wow.
And thrown her into a tree well.
Oh no.
The impact threw her into a tree well. She's unconscious. She's there for some period of time. And another skier finally notices her and, calls the ski patrol, and they pull her out and get her down the mountain. And, it was interesting. You're interviewing her and most people might be kind of mad that someone hit her, was out of control, not obeying the rules, hit her, and left her for dead, basically. But she was just filled with gratitude. She says, "Oh my gosh, I'm so grateful that, that person noticed me and stopped to call the ski patrol, and for all the ski patrol people." And she says, "I'm grateful that, 99% of the people on the mountain are following the rules and looking out for other people." And she was, she was just grateful for the good things that happened rather than the one bad thing that could have killed her. I mean, people die in in tree wells every year. So
wow. It's very inspiring to see the way people take situations that they're placed in, because again, you got that choice of like how to see it. You could make up a story for like the victim story, or the story of overcoming adversity and challenge, and I feel like that's an option that we hold the power to choose to believe in. And it's a beautiful thing when you get to see people that do overcome adversity and choose the good story, the overcoming story.
Yeah. I mean, we get to choose what we can't control many times, what happens to us, other than making bad decisions. But we can control how we view that, the story that we tell about that. And there was a blog post, I'm not going to remember who it was by. It's in the book, though, that talks about gratitude being like a 2x2 matrix. And, there's things we want and don't want, and there's things we have and don't have. And most people, when they're grateful, it's for things that they want that they also have. And then, of course, we have a big chunk of our culture focused on things that we want, but we don't have. Things that we see on other people's Instagram feeds and all the advertisements, those are things that we want or think we want, but we don't have. But the author brought up an overlooked source of gratitude, and that is things that we don't have that we don't want. And so, when you talk to, I don't consider I've had a hard life or anything, because I know people that have gone through way worse things that I've ever endured. And even if it's not people we know personally, just on the news, it's pretty easy to find people that have it worse than you.
Yeah.
If I think the water's not quite hot enough in my shower, it's like, yeah, but I could be holed up in Gaza right now, or I could be in a refugee camp in Sudan. It's like life is not that bad.
Yeah.
And that's one of the great things I think about backpacking and minimalist backpacking is, I just got back from Buskin Gulch, my annual trip, and cleaned my gear and packed it all up again. And so with 5 pounds of gear, I have everything I need. So I really don't need that much to be happy. And, being out for a week or whatever, sleeping on the ground, getting rained on, treating my water, worrying about, where I'm going to get water, depending on where I'm hiking, fills me with new appreciation when I get back to my home. I don't take potable water on demand at any temperature you want for granted anymore. It's like, it's magic. It's amazing. And my soft, cushy bed with the memory foam is amazing compared to sleeping in the dirt.
Yeah, absolutely. I love that, actually. Have you ever read the book The 5 a.m. Club by Robin Sharma?
No.
That one is one of my favorite books of all time. I love it. And one of the things in that book, they actually talk about the act of voluntary discomfort. And in the book, one of the characters actually chooses to sleep on the floor one night a week just for that voluntary discomfort. And just to, again, I think it comes back to the comfort zone thing, and just being able to, and gratitude as well, just being grateful for what you have and being able to appreciate what you actually have, because it absolutely could always be worse. And I try to think about that when I'm going through a hardship, and I just imagine what's something that could make this situation worse. At least it's not that. I try to just put into perspective that it could always be worse from here. So I try to keep myself positive in that sense.
Yeah, I do that too. It could be worse. And the other thing I do is think about, no matter how bad I think it is and how stressful, if I think about it, there's probably more than half the people in the world that would trade their situation for mine in a heartbeat. Because I'm stressed about meeting a deadline or something. Well, a good chunk of the world is stressed about when's the next time they're going to eat.
Right.
So, helps to kind of put perspective on. It's like, yeah, it's hard for me and I'm stressed about it, but I don't know. My wife's a nurse, and sometimes she'd get home from work, and I'd say, "How was work?" She says, "Nobody died, nobody cried." It's like,
Yeah,
it's a good day.
That's good.
Sure, there was stress, but it's like, hey, nobody died.
Yeah.
So
Absolutely, yeah. Another thing you mentioned in your book too that I really spoke to me was your just the way you looked at the Schindler's List and how you explained that in your words. What it reminded me of is I know a gentleman. He was actually on my podcast. I would actually encourage you to listen to it if you could find the time. It was episode number 90. Sinisha Gudelj. He was a prisoner of war survivor from Croatia, and the things that he had to endure was just traumatizing and heartbreaking. And I'm so grateful that he trusted me enough to come on the podcast and share his story. It got very difficult, and it really tested me as a host, and just him being strong enough and brave enough to share his story. It was incredible, but just another story about overcoming adversity and struggles, and just hearing it from like face to face. I interviewed him face to face, and it was just heartbreaking what he had to go through. And again, it's just another thing to keep me into perspective. Like my struggles and my worries aren't that big of a deal. It's really like if I'm worried about, like you said, meeting deadlines or bills or anything like that. What another thing too, especially with social media, is like what people think of me. Like these problems are not problems. It's
or we've gotten to the point where we're so obsessed with how people treat us and my rights, and I can imagine your podcast guest. Imagine someone describing to him like, well, I didn't like the way they looked at me. I felt, that I wasn't respected properly. And he's like, really? You're unhappy about how they looked at you, or maybe something they said to you? It's like,
absolutely. Yeah.
They weren't starving and beating you. It's like, I don't know. Not a lot of sympathy there,
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. He actually did share that with me, how lucky we have it here in America. And we just, the people that are complaining about how life is here, he always says like, try it outside of here.
Yeah.
But it's easy to just get lost in looking. The biggest thing that I noticed with social media is all it is people filtering out the highlights of their life, and then just filtering those highlights and then sharing them and then making it appear as though that's their whole life, and it's all just not real. That's not their full life. So then people just get lost looking at that.
Yeah, I don't get it. I'm with the book, I'm on social media now, kicking and screaming.
Yep.
And I have people posting some stuff, but it's like, and I figure you only get one chance to capitalize on the momentum of the release of the book, and so
right.
I'll do it. But
yep,
it's not my happy place for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. That's like pushing yourself out of your comfort zone.
Yeah, for a specific season and for a specific purpose. And I remember having this discussion with Becky Robinson from Weaving Influence, who I hired to help launch the book. And I said, Becky, I just don't feel right having stuff posted on, Instagram and LinkedIn and stuff, because I don't read other people's stuff.
Yeah.
Why would I expect them to read mine? And she says, look, you might not be on there, but some people are. And so if they're on there and they like doing that, well, you need to be on there. So it's like, okay. Yeah.
If you say so.
Yeah, exactly.
It's so funny. So you did mention also your like the desires of things, like looking at things and having the desires or the wants for things, and you did mention that in your book as well, just like having that want list and putting something on the list if you feel like a spur of the moment kind of thing, like you want to, like a next purchase, or it would be nice to have this, and you just put it on your list. Could you explain that process for the listeners? 'Cause I really like that idea.
Sure. Yeah. I have on the notes app on my phone, I have a list called When I'm Rich. And so, and I am rich, but and I could buy anything, but the point is like putting something on there so that, if I had so much money, it just didn't matter.
Right.
And so it's a way of constraining kind of my natural consumptive desire.
Mm-hmm.
So that I put stuff on there, and then, putting it on the list takes away that immediacy, like, oh, I need to buy this thing, a shiny object. My life would be better if I had this. And I find oftentimes, I look at it later, it's got, I don't really want that anymore. The thrill is past.
Right.
And it saves me from buying it and it ending up, in my closet or in Goodwill or something like that. A friend of mine, Mark Verber, has an even more sophisticated system. He has what he calls a shopping diet.
Okay.
So he has a list, and he allows himself 2 1-week windows a year for buying stuff. And this is obviously not groceries and, if something wears out, but, the stuff all the other stuff that we buy. And he sticks to it. At Gossamer Gear, we released a new tent, a new shelter. We only made 100 of them, the Whisper. And he was telling me, gosh, that looks like a really exciting tent. I hope it's not sold out by the time my shopping window opens up. And I thought, that's hardcore, I would probably talk myself into, well, this is going to sell out. I need an exception for this. But he's like, nope, it's not my window.
Wow.
And he puts stuff on this list, and he said he finds that, when the week window opens up, then he opens up the list and looks at it, and either if it's something that he still wants, he buys it. If it's something he's like, I don't really care about that anymore, he dumps it from the list, deletes it. And if it's something like, I still might want that, but I don't want it right now, he just leaves it on the list to marinate for a while.
Okay.
And the other advantage is he used the list for, I think it's after, like the windows are kind of after Christmas and after his birthday.
Mm-hmm.
So if people want like to buy him something for Christmas, he shares the list with them. So, they can buy something that's on the list. So he's not, he's not getting stuff that wasn't even on his radar.
Right.
And it could be something that, he doesn't have to buy. Now he could afford it. That's not the point. The point is to, kind of regulate, stuff doesn't make us happy, but we think it does because we live in America. So it's just a way of regulating that. And to me, that's next level from my silly When I'm Rich list, but same kind of purpose.
Yeah. No, I love that, because there is this weird like desire for like see a flashy object and you just want it immediately. And I love that idea of regulating it. So thank you for sharing that. One thing as well that you mention a lot in the book is your engineering mindset and just minimalism as well. And I really enjoyed that as well. And it plays along with this nicely, where it's not the flashy objects that we need. And then you take that a step further with like, how can I make everything as efficient as possible? And I remember you also sharing a story where just the efficiency aspect of, you were hiking with a woman, and she was just like being efficient with your hiking and getting the miles in and just continuing to hike, and then her ability to like actually change outfits while keeping in motion, just getting miles down, and that was really impressive to me, just hearing that, like just taking in every aspect that you can and trying to make it as efficient as possible, like down to your steps that you're making and where you're stepping, like stepping over the logs and things like that. And I love that mindset and just the efficiency and the minimalism, and it's uncommon, but you took it a whole another step there, and it's very impressive and inspiring.
Well, I have to admit, I do a much better job of minimalism in backpacking than in the rest of life. I've obviously gotten my backpack very light and very efficient out in the backcountry. But at home, I prefer less over more, but I also like to have the right tool for the job and the one that's most efficient, and, the particular, the tool that I'm used to, that I've found that I prefer for the job. So that leads me to have more stuff than some true minimalists would, I'm sure.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. Sometimes you do find that with like multi-tools and things like that as well, where it's like, it's not quite right. Like maybe there's a better tool for this job instead of trying to save some space. But with backpacking, that's a different story. It was such an interesting take too. I really liked how, because like the majority of people would think if you're out hiking and you're looking for comfort, they would think like something with more padding, but the way you take it is like just cut the weight so you don't have to worry about that as much, because the majority of people don't even think about like lowering what they're packing or like minimizing what they're packing. They just think like, oh, get a nice comfy cushy pack so that way I'm comfortable out there, and you just take it as lighten the load so I'm comfortable out there, and I really like that.
Well, and that depends. I always say I'm about to give a couple talks at our local REI, and I always qualify. It depends on how you do backpacking. If you're hiking into a lake and you're going to camp there for 3 days, you might pack differently than I do. But when I'm going backpacking, I'm planning on hiking 20, 30 miles a day. If it's light, I'm moving basically. Mm-hmm. And so the greatest comfort for me is going to be a lighter pack. Because, sleeping is just something I do when I'm not walking, basically. So if I spend most of the time walking, then the lighter my pack is, the more comfortable the walking portion is going to be. So,
mm-hmm. Yeah, I remember too, you sharing the story in the book too, where you were actually drilling holes through your toothbrush on your bike right across the country. I kind of chuckled at that one. That's again, just taking it that extra step, and it was a cool idea.
Yeah, I wish I still had that toothbrush. That would be fun.
Yeah. So back to social media, actually, I did follow you on Instagram, and you do share a lot of your baking. So my fiance, she is getting big into baking as well, and she's actually like churning her own butter and just getting into creating her own ingredients and her own food. And it's fascinating how actually doable it is. Like we're in this world where we just go to the grocery store and get everything we need, and I think people don't even have an idea of like we can actually do this, and people used to. So what got you into the baking?
Well, we actually have I grew up on home baked bread. My mom
nice.
Always baked, which I hated as a kid. I loved to go over to a friend's house and get some Wonder Bread with bologna on it. My mom was like a health food, organic farmer before that was even a thing.
Okay, yeah.
So we were always eating fresh vegetables, and she would make like 6 loaves of whole wheat bread at a time and put them in the freezer and haul them out. So I hated it. But, here I am baking my own bread. And we actually have 3 generations of Van Peski males baking at this point.
Oh, wow.
My dad bakes all his own bread, plus amazing bagels and other stuff. And my son Grant is baking bread.
Oh, wow.
If your wife is interested in some sourdough starter, I can mail you. We have a very, very robust starter. He's named CJ, short for Cornelis Johannes Van Peski, my grandfather, who was a European trained chef. And I've sent CJs all over the country and even the world. And there have been other people who, say, I already have a starter. And he does the job. And then we get CJ, they go, oh my gosh, it's crazy. The bread's rising like insane amounts because he's extremely robust. So
wow, yeah, that would be amazing. I'd love that, and my fiance would love that as well. Thank you for the offer.
And I don't know if you and your fiance are coffee drinkers.
Yes, yeah, we I kind of been bouncing back and forth between I love coffee, and I was trying the mushroom supplement, like the combination. I was doing that for quite a while, so I go back and forth.
So here's another, I think, fun thing that you can do. I mean, when you buy like a bag of coffee beans, roasted coffee beans,
yep,
they smell so good, and it tastes so good for the first like 3 to 5 days. But if you bought the 2-pound bag at Costco or something, by the time you get to the end, it's not the same.
Right. Yep.
So a thru hiker taught me the stovetop, sometimes called the Ethiopian method, where you just use like a heavy, cast iron or heavy aluminum skillet on the stovetop, and you just heat it up and then put the green coffee beans in it, because green coffee beans will keep for years with no degradation.
Oh, wow.
And so I roast coffee on the stovetop every, 3, 4, 5 days. So your coffee is always like that freshest top of the bag taste.
Oh, wow.
And it's just a fun way to engage something you're doing yourself.
Yeah, that's amazing. And I'm sure it makes the house smell great as well.
Yeah, you do have to have like a functioning stove hood that, goes to the outside, not just blows it through. Yeah. But even with that, it still smells good. Yeah.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, thank you. Yeah, that's a great idea. I never even thought about that. Yeah, I do love my coffee. You do kind of talk about in your book your journey to finding your faith. That was another thing that really spoke deeply to me. It resonated because the family I grew up in did not raise me religious. My mother was raised a Catholic, and then my father, and it was from my grandfather. His father was, they were atheists, and my father would not allow. I know my mom tried to get me baptized as a baby, and my father wouldn't allow it. And working on the farm, I was more surrounded with my father. Then when I moved off of the farm, met my fiance, she's a Catholic, and I'm so grateful for her patience with me and for her resilience and strength and her ability to sit through my questions, and she really just, her patience, she just guided me on this journey and answered my questions. And then it's been over a year and a half ago now, she got me my first Bible, and I've been like inseparable from that. And I read it, and when I first opened it up, I'm like, wow, like I had no idea what to expect, no frame of reference, and like I did not know what was in there, but I found questions in there that I had been asking myself years prior, and I'm like, I did not expect to find this. And so actually, it was 2 weeks ago, my fiance and I got baptized together, and it was such an amazing, beautiful experience. And so that your story really resonated with me, and I wanted to ask you, what was your faith journey like, and how did you find that, and how I know you mentioned that your wife was Christian, correct?
Yeah, my wife, Mary Frances, actually, grew up Catholic.
Okay.
So, she always had faith. It was,
Yeah.
God was always real to her.
Mm-hmm.
And I grew up without any, we never went to church. My mom did have us christened, or there was something that she did. And there was no explanation. It was like,
Okay.
hey, we're going to church. And I remember going to a church. I don't remember what was done. I was like, okay, now we're going back home. It's like, so she had some thought about that. And then when my parents divorced and my mom, with us 3 kids, drove across the country from California back to Western Massachusetts because she had gone to college in Wellesley and just felt more comfortable on the East Coast. And she started going to Society of Friends, a Quaker meeting. And so we, when we were young, we went with her. That was the program on Sunday, went to Quaker meeting. And I remember, I understand there's some differences, but for whatever reason, the Quaker meeting that we went to, everyone sat in a circle because they feel that there is that of God in everyone. And so you don't need a preacher standing up in the front to tell you, it's like God will speak to you directly. So everyone sat in a circle, kind of a circular building. And if you felt that the Spirit was talking, then you stood up and shared. And sometimes, the whole hour would go by with hardly anything. And sometimes people are popping up and down like popcorn. And as a kid, I remember what impressed me was you had older people dressed in suits sitting next to smelly hippies in torn jeans. And I thought, I don't remember there being any instruction in the Bible or anything like that. Maybe I wasn't paying attention, obviously wasn't ready, but that made an impact on me. That's like, okay, there's something here that people that look this different can find a common ground and interact with each other. And then I didn't think much of it. At one point, our mom said, hey, you're old enough to choose whether you want to go to meeting on Sunday. And it was a pretty long drive, as I remember. So I'm like, nah, I'll pass, get my Sundays to myself. And then as I described in the book, it wasn't until, I'm an engineer, I can figure things out and fix problems. That's kind of what I do. And it wasn't until the birth of our second son, who was severely disabled, that I was like, man, this is a problem I cannot fix. And, that led to my gopher conversion, where God used a gopher to bring me to Jesus.
That story in the book really made me smile. It's interesting how, just turning points like that. Like I feel like maybe there is some sort of a sense of humor because that made me smile. It's a beautiful thing, and I love, like you were saying, it's like a come as you are, and we can all find common ground, and it's amazing, and this life is absolutely amazing too, and it goes back to gratitude. And just one thing I always love to share is just that it's not that, like, if I'm ever like doing something that I don't want to do, or I have to do something that I feel like I have to do something that I don't want to do, or if I'm talking to like a family member, like I always share with them, it's not that we have to do it, it's that we get to do it. And we're here to serve. We're here to help one another, and the impact and the ripple effect, the impact we leave on one another. Towards the end of your book, you talk about like the 6 degrees, the connection between people, and I thought that was so beautiful, and I just love just thinking about like the effect that we have on one another. And a lot of times when I'm speaking on the podcast, I try to think about if if this is going to affect people, and who's going to hear this that needs to hear this, and just sending out a ripple of good into the world, and just doing my very best with what I got. And I can tell that you've done the absolute same in your life, and it's just so cool to hear stories like yours.
Yeah, Francie and I always think, I mean, and with your podcast, I mean, you're touching so many people, and hopefully, the book will touch some people too. Francie and I always imagine, getting to heaven and hearing all the stories. Someone walks up to you and says like, you don't know me, but I listened to your podcast, episode number 90, and that changed my life. I did something different, made different decisions, and ended up in a different place because of that. And it's going to be so fun to find out all those stories one day. Now, I'm excited when God brings someone new into my life, and our paths cross. Because I always wonder, like, oh, does this person have something that I need? Are they going to help me do something, or tell me some truth that I need to hear? Or am I meeting them so that I can help them do something that they're trying to do, or introduce them to someone that I know that could help them? And there's a story I early on when I was getting the website together, I needed some pictures of me, nice pictures. I've achieved that status in life where my, screenshot actually looks better than me in person. But so I called a local guy who kind of knows everybody in Bend, and asked him, and he turned me onto this other guy, and I had coffee with him, and he says, well, I don't do that kind of photography, but a buddy of mine does. And he shared that, his buddy had just received like a terminal diagnosis. But he could take some pictures that I needed. So I made an appointment a couple weeks out to meet with the second photographer. And in the meantime, I suddenly remembered, like, oh man, I know a thru hiker who does like portrait photography. And in fact, I'd been using a picture she took of me like 20 years ago for a long time. So I just called her up, and she said, oh yeah, of course, I can come down and take some pictures, and those are actually the ones I use. And so I didn't need to meet with this portrait photographer anymore. But I thought, well, I already got the appointment, I'll go talk to him. And, he told me his story and how, he had a bucket list, and he didn't know how long he had to live, but he wanted to do some of these things. In the meantime, since he had limited time, he quit his job, and was focused on doing some of these trips, and particularly wanted to get to Patagonia. So, because we've been intentional in our giving and setting aside a separate amount, we have a separate account. We can write $1,000 check, and it doesn't make a difference in our lifestyle because it's already God's money. It's not ours. And so we were able to help, help him achieve that Patagonia trip. And so I just love how, I meet this guy thinking he's going to solve a problem for me, but that's not the way it went. I get to help him achieve something that's on his list. So.
Yeah, that's amazing. I love that. It's just beautiful, the connection and the service that we can do. I think about, like you said, it's not our money, it's God's money. I like that. I've never heard that before, but I do think about how we are here to serve, and how, like, what I'd like to think about is, like, we didn't have the choice to be born into this world. So there's a purpose here. We're here to do something, and that is to serve. And what I think about is, like, even these bodies, like, to take care of them, because they really aren't ours. Like, we're given them here. It's almost like a rental car. Like, we're we're given these bodies, we take care of them, and we do what we can to help others with them. And then when we pass away, we're returning the bodies, and it's just like just helping people is what we're here for, and I love that.
Yeah, and you never know the impact you're going to have. I tell the story in the book of how I ended up taking a part-time dishwasher gig at our local bakery, and I just thought God had my name on it. I didn't know why particularly, and there've been a lot of benefits, and I've been able to have some impacts at the bakery that that I'm not really at liberty to talk about, but my wife Francie took a picture of me as I went over for my interview, and I'm all dressed up in a suit. Yeah. And we have friends here in Bend, and the daughter had severe trauma through a couple of experiences, and so it dropped out of school and kind of moved back home to her room basically. But she knew us because we'd been over there for dinner, and Francie sent the picture over to the mom, and the mom laughed, and the daughter says, "What's up?" And she says, "Well, this is Glenn. He's dressed up to go for his interview position at the dishwasher." And Francie, my wife, got a call from the mom a couple weeks later. She says, "You would not believe what happened." The daughter, having seen, she was confused, like, why is Glenn going to wash dishes? Is he just mocking them? And the mom said, no, he's looking for a way to serve, and they need someone to wash dishes.
Yeah.
And so on the phone call a couple weeks later, the mom told Francis, like, the daughter just figured, you know what, if Glenn can humble himself and go wash dishes, I can go do something. And so she went and got some job that wasn't in her field, went on to do that job, re-enrolled in school. Now she's like winning ultra marathons and has moved out. And, that was like the one little thing that was needed it'd been, I don't know, a year or two that she'd been stuck in that spot due to the trauma. And this was like me going to interview for washing dishes was the thing that got her unstuck. So that could be the only reason I needed to take that job. I don't know.
Yeah. Wow. Yeah, that's amazing. Yeah, you never know. Like we were talking about, just the connection and the impact on others. That's amazing that spoke to them. Wow. Thank you for sharing.
You bet.
Well, Glenn, it's been a pleasure to have you on the podcast. Can you share any words of inspiration for the younger crowd on just life nowadays and getting people outdoors and why? Could you share with us your love for the outdoors and what's so beautiful about it and why we need to spend more time out in nature?
I think it's the way we're wired. You need time outdoors, and that time outdoors off devices. It allows your mind to slip into a soft focus where, you can be creative and solve problems. I talked to a guy recently, and he said, "Yeah, anytime I can't figure something out, I just get away from it and go take a walk by the river, and invariably." The solution comes to me. So it's just so important in this, for mental health, anxiety, and all the things that we seem to have an epidemic of, to spend more time outside, away from our devices, both alone and with other people.
Yeah, absolutely. Well said. Thank you so much. I really appreciate all your time. I'm so grateful for the opportunity to have you on the podcast. It really meant a lot to me. And I love the wisdom that you shared and the knowledge that you have. It was an honor. So thank you very much.
You bet. It's been a blessing to talk. And, if people want to get in touch, probably the easiest is through my website, glenvanpeski.com. And I guess in closing, I would just, the way I inscribe a lot of books these days are work hard, be nice, stay curious.
I love that. Thank you so much. All right, guys. Thanks for tuning into this week's episode of the Mind Hiking Podcast. Hope you guys enjoyed and let this episode reach who it needs to reach. And that's all we can ask for. It's an amazing thing, the connection, and just to be able to hear these stories and just inspire others. It's just a beautiful life that we get to live. So hopefully this message spoke to you. Thank you so much for all your love and support, and we will see you guys next week.